6, 5, 3, 2, 1. Welcome to the first October edition of the PFF Forecast. I'm George. I'm going to have a bunch of guests on today. It's going to be Forecast 2.0, I guess. And we can't replace Eric with one person. So we've got a bunch of really great people that'll be joining the podcast. We're going to guess the lines. We're also going to talk about one thing that a bunch of really smart people learned today in the NFL. There's some interesting stuff that happened. We're going to talk about it all. It's going to be a great show. Let's rock. All right. I've got some guests here, joined by some fun people, some smart people. I've got PFF Brad Spielberger. I can't believe I said PFF Brad, but you have it written there, so I just read it. Arjun, Menon, and Tej Seth are joining me. And we're going to mix it up. We're going to do a bunch of different things on this podcast for the rest of the year just to try and see what creates the best football conversation that we can possibly have. And I thought this was a great way to start it off. If you are not familiar with these guys' work, and I would imagine most members of the printing press are, because they're avid followers of smart Twitter handles, and these guys all have them. But Brad has been with PFF now for a little while, actually, Brad, and he does a bunch of different things, both on the consumer side and on the enterprise side. He is noted for his cap understanding. You can actually go find it on Amazon, but also is an avid bettor and a Bears fan. So we had Eric on the podcast before, and he would be gloating about the Chiefs. We now have Brad, and he'll just be crying about the Bears. So it'd be great. And then Arjun and Tej are both students at University of Michigan. Tej is a senior, Arjun is a junior. They have a podcast called Take the Points, which is how I decided to bring them on the podcast. I listened to their podcast. I thought it was a great conversation. So I said, let's bring them on here and get the printing press their point of view. So fellas, welcome. We are going to start with what we learned today, week 4 takeaways. And Eric and I would kind of do something similar, but we're going to try and make this a little more data-driven today, because all these guys do a great job of using data to analyze the game of football. So let's start with this. Let's go to you, Brad, first. And hopefully this is not Bears related, but give us your number one takeaway, big thing that you learned today.
It's loosely Bears related, unfortunately. And it's not just week 4, but I think it really sticks out in week 4. And that's that I think I was too low on some of the teams, namely the Seahawks and the Falcons, just on their offense and getting a bad journeyman quarterback that maybe isn't a long-term solution, but is probably better right now than these rookies and sophomores. I say that because Trevor Lawrence was 11 for 23 with 4 lost fumbles. First time in a century a guy has lost 4 fumbles and an interception. Justin Fields, 10 of 21, 163 yards, took 6 sacks, no touchdowns for the 3rd week in a row. Zach Wilson did have a nice 4th quarter, but did not play well. Davis Mills also not great. So I think I need to, going forward, maybe next season, give some more credence to some of those veterans that are, again, not good long-term solutions, but might actually win you some games, win you some bets early in the season.
I guess we got kind of spoiled, right? Like, thinking back to the way that Mahomes, I think, and Allen, maybe to a slightly lesser degree, but definitely the way that Mahomes changed people's view on rookie quarterbacks. And obviously then you have Burrow, Herbert. I don't know. Do you think it's actually going to sour the way teams kind of go into next year? Because I guess the middling quarterback, like an Andy Dalton, a Cooper Rush is a good example. You can get them for kind of cheap, but like you don't really have hope in that case. So I guess what is it really worth? And you end up maybe performing well, but just well enough not to actually get a good quarterback lower in the draft. So I think that'd be interesting.
Could definitely put you in purgatory for sure, which is not where you want to be.
Yeah, they put you in purgatory, or they don't get you across the number that you need, which was Davis Mills for me today. Let's go next. Tej, why don't you load us up here?
Yeah, mine is a little bit similar to Brad's, but I'm kind of going in the other direction too. And it's the good teams aren't as good as usual, and the bad teams aren't as bad as they usually are. So, if you start with like the good teams, with the Bills offense looked unstoppable through the first 2 weeks, but they've had some moments these last two games where they actually look like they can be beat. And today they're going up against a pretty bad defense in the Ravens and didn't put up as many points as you'd expect from like a very top tier offense. And then, you have the Eagles, who's a lot of people think is the best team in the NFC, and they went down early against the Jaguars. Hurts was reverting back to a lot of his 2021 self, where once there was pressure on him from the Jaguars defensive line, he was kind of like a one and done quarterback where he'd look at his first read and then get out of the pocket. And that, was problematic until it kind of settled down in the second half for them. The Packers offense ranked 17th in expected points added per play right now, and they went into overtime versus a team that's now 1-3 playing a third string quarterback. And then the Chargers and Ravens, because of a combination of injuries and then just not being as good as we thought, are kind of like why I think like the really good teams right now that are usually elite are a little bit closer to like the middle tier teams than in usual seasons.
I was actually thinking about making that my big takeaway as well, because it definitely feels the two, I guess, teams at the top. Now, I'll ask you this question, actually. Who would you put if you were kind of ranking the top, let's say top 5? What does that look like for you? What's your top tier?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, top tier is Chiefs, Bills, and Eagles. I think I'd throw into tier 1 as well. And then you kind of have the Ravens, and then whoever you want to choose between Packers and Chargers in the second tier.
Yeah, so I guess you think back to, let's think back to like last year, maybe, or the year before. Those teams at the top, I guess you'd say the Chiefs. Would you say the Chiefs are better or worse than they were last year? Bills better or worse than they were last year? Obviously, Eagles are better, but like, are you kind of saying that you think those teams are actually worse than they were a year ago?
Yeah, I do think so, because the Chiefs' margin for error is smaller than it was last year. That's why they end up losing to a pretty bad Colts team last week, just because, they did a lot. They should have won the game, but they did a lot of things that let the Colts stick around, and like they didn't have like the explosive passing game to kind of like blow that game up. So the Chiefs are still a really good team. They're just not as good as they were last year. And I feel that way about the Bills too after the last couple of weeks.
Yeah, they kind of they got a little lucky at the end of that game. We might talk about that one here in a second. Arjun, let's go to you.
Yeah, I think so. My big takeaway is I think winning in the trenches, it matters more than it used to winning in coverage. So I think trench play has become more important this year. So Michael Lopez, who's the director of analytics for the NFL, he was doing a study on coverages and scoring from the first couple weeks of the year. So teams have been playing more cover 2 and less cover 1. So what a lot of the things we've done from this past summer as interns in the R&D department is like when you play man, you kind of know what the outcome is going to be because it's kind of just talent dependent. If you have better corners, you're more likely to win in man versus, if you have better receivers, you're more likely to win on offense. But in zone, like when teams are playing more cover 2 and more cover 4 and more quarters and cover 6, I think it muddies the skill gap a little bit. So you need to have a good trench advantage because you need to be able to run the ball. I think running the ball is especially important for teams that aren't able to pass, especially in a singular game. And I was looking through the slate today, and I found 3 games where the winners had a higher expected points added per rush than they did EPA per pass. So the Raiders averaged 0.09 EPA per rush versus a 0 EPA per pass. The Eagles scored 29 points, averaging a 0.12 EPA per rush versus a negative 0.26 EPA per pass. And the Falcons averaged 0.22 EPA per rush versus a negative 0.2 EPA per pass. So all these 3 teams won because they dominated in the trenches when they couldn't get anything going through the air. And I think once we hit the playoffs and team starts teams start to play more zone and less man, I think we're going to see the run game become more and more important. So winning in the trenches on both sides of the ball is important. And I think it becomes more important, especially when you start handicapping games where the talent level is pretty equal between teams.
I can't believe it takes 1 week. Eric is off, and in 1 week we have the restoration of the run game come to this podcast. That's all it took. It's interesting because, I think your point and Tej's point go sort of hand in hand. You look at kind of teams maybe being more clumped together, and why are they more clumped together? I guess my take would be, you mentioned the different defenses being played, but I also think just quarterback play has not been as good. Mm-hmm. And generally the biggest determinant of a spread in the NFL is obviously the quarterback. So it kind of makes sense that with the quarterbacks playing not as well and the talent level being a little more even, you now have different things that are going to be a little bit more important. And so it's definitely really interesting. I guess, how do you see that playing out from a handicapping perspective? Like, as you look at this upcoming week, as you look at maybe down the road, I don't know, do you have a heuristic for kind of the way that you might take those things into account?
Yeah. So last Sunday, when I was listening to you and Eric, I loved the Browns versus the Falcons. Like, I thought the Browns, like, it was like -2. I thought that was a good bet. It moved down to -1, and I was like, this is still a good bet. But then I got the Clowney news and then the Myles Garrett news. So now the Browns have a disadvantage on the defensive side of the ball in the trenches. So that immediately shifted my thinking, where I knew Atlanta was going to be able to do whatever they wanted up front. So even though my conviction on the Browns at the time where everyone was healthy was strong, because I felt they would have the advantage on both sides of the ball, once they lost the two guys that can stop the run and get after the passer, you saw a Falcons offense that methodically pretty much marched the ball down the field in the final two drives simply by running the ball. So I think that is an example of like how that would play into a handicap. Another one would be the Cowboys versus the Commanders. I mean, Cowboys -3, I believe, at home. And so the thing with that is the Cowboys D-line is so good. Dorrance Armstrong, DeMarcus Lawrence, Micah Parsons, Dante Fowler. And while the Commanders offensive line isn't bad, the Cowboys D is suited to stop the run well and stop the pass well because of all the stunts and things that Dan Quinn calls. So I think there's where you could take a bet on the Cowboys, where they have the advantage up front on both sides of the ball. And I think you would look to, Carson Wentz only had a 2.42 average time to throw because Ron Rivera knew the Cowboys were going to get after them. So once the Commanders went down, they couldn't get back in the game because they couldn't call those deeper developing dropbacks. So I know that was a long answer, and I know like there's other possibilities with this. You can live bet Cowboys when the Commanders can't drop back as well. So there's endless possibilities, I think, with understanding trench warfare and who has the advantage on both sides of the ball.
It's interesting because it's one of the things that like we do at PFF, I think, remarkably well, right, is actually measure offensive line and defensive line play. And it's something where you can kind of rather quickly sort of pick out rather big mismatches as well, right? And you can sort of see like areas where one team might be able to dominate over the other. Another interesting component of that is injuries. Continuity on the offensive line is something that we've studied, and Eric has written about how important continuity is, and you can start to take advantage of those things. I do think, to be honest with you, it can be a little boring when like the only thing that matters is the quarterback. So it leads nicely into the thing that I learned today, which is that the Denver Broncos suck. This is what I learned today. Okay. The Denver Broncos stink. I tried to give them the benefit of the doubt. I tried to give Nathaniel Hackett the benefit of the doubt. I tried to give Russell Wilson the benefit of the doubt. It's bad when the Atlanta Falcons are the safe part of your lock of the week. Okay. We had Atlanta +7.5, Denver +8.5. And you would have said, man, there's no way that the Denver Broncos, with a $245 million quarterback, a defense that is playing really well, are going to get blown out by the Las Vegas Raiders. Las Vegas Raiders had allowed the third worst EPA per pass play through 3 weeks against the vaunted Denver Broncos offense. They managed to have a negative EPA per pass play this week against the Denver Broncos. Embarrassing. It's just embarrassing. They do not. The Seattle Seahawks, I get that they played the Detroit Lions. The Detroit Lions are not even in existence on defense. But the Seattle Seahawks offense is more cohesive, more coherent, and looks better, has better tempo with Geno freaking Smith, and nowhere near the same level of talent than the Denver Broncos look. And so I know 4 weeks is not a lot of time. I know they didn't play in the preseason, but it does not look good in Denver. And you saw the Chiefs tonight. The Chiefs look amazing. Obviously Justin Herbert is really good. I think you can sort of kiss the playoffs goodbye if you're the Denver Broncos at this point. And that's what I learned this week. So I'll ask you guys, are you out on Denver?
I'll jump in. Yes, 100%. I also tried to give them the benefit of the doubt. I think even Vegas turned pretty quickly when they were home dogs to San Francisco in week 3. Like, I think that was them telling you what they thought. They're just not a good football team. Randy Gregory got hurt in this game. Javonte Williams got hurt in this game. So they were actually one of the healthier teams coming into this game outside of the receiver injuries, of course. I'm out on the Broncos. I mean, I'm out on the Raiders too, but definitely out on the Broncos.
Yeah, I think it's because, when Matt LaFleur went to Green Bay and was working with Aaron Rodgers for the first year, their offense wasn't that good. Their passing game wasn't that good. And the second year, Rodgers comes out, wins MVP. And, Hackett is not Matt LaFleur and Russell Wilson is not Aaron Rodgers, right? They're both worse than their counterparts in Green Bay. So that's why you're seeing a lot worse of that version of, a new quarterback trying to learn that type of offense in Denver right now. And I think it's just hilarious that Geno Smith ranks 5th in EPA per play. Russell Wilson ranks 16th in EPA per play. Russell Wilson also has a lower EPA per play since the 2021 season than Teddy Bridgewater. So both the guy that he's replacing and his replacement in Seattle, he's been less efficient than both of them.
Yeah, I am out on this on the Broncos also, but no. I do think the result was a little bit misleading today. I feel like that Melvin Gordon fumble kind of changed the whole game. It was 10-10. Broncos were driving, and they had scored in their previous 2 possessions. So I think they were in a good rhythm. Then Melvin Gordon just fumbles it like he has been all season, 66 yards to the house. And even though the Broncos came back and tied it up, I think you want to force Derek Carr to be playing from behind where he's in obvious passing situations, especially because the Raiders' offensive line is garbage. So I think it was a tough way for that game to swing. I'm curious. I'd have to look at what the win probability swing on that fumble was. But yeah, it's tough when you have a quarterback that looks not that good, not playing at an elite level, and is getting paid like an elite quarterback, and the coaching hasn't been up there yet. Especially with how much positive things were coming out of Broncos camp in the offseason.
Yeah, Vikings fans know what that's like, and Kirk Cousins at least plays at a league average level. It's like I don't know. You watch that offense. I thought it was. The fumble was obviously really bad. It got taken back to the house by Robertson there, but the end of the game, you're throwing kind of your Hail Mary last ditch effort to a 3rd string running back, and he drops it. It's like you deserve everything you get there. I want to bring up one more thing before I let you guys go, and this was the John Harbaugh decision at the end of the Buffalo Bills game, because runner up to the thing that I learned today is the fact that we still have not learned anything about, I guess, using math to analyze 4th down situations. I heard multiple times on different, whether it's halftime shows or post-game shows, where it's like, well, John Harbaugh didn't trust his defense. He didn't trust his defense there, so he had to go for it. To rewind, it was 4th and 2 on the 2-yard line, game tied at 20, 4:15 left in the game. So still a lot of time left in that game. I think that needs to be considered certainly here. And Harbaugh decides to go for it. Calls a pass play. Lamar Jackson basically drops back like 25 yards because he's immediately under pressure, and then heaves one into the end zone, and it gets intercepted. Buffalo takes the ball, drives it all the way down the field, runs the clock out, wins the game. And, the math here, I think, is pretty solid. You can go check out Ben Baldwin's fourth down bot that tweets out every single fourth down decision. It's at Ben_bot_Baldwin. But essentially it was, pretty decisive in terms of going for it here. And I thought Harbaugh did a really nice job of explaining the reasoning here. If you kick the field goal, then the other team knows they have to score 3. They're going to use all 4 downs. They have Josh Allen. What are the chances the Baltimore Ravens, who I think you mentioned, Tej, their defense is atrocious. What are the chances they're stopping them? It's, not high. So you go for the 7, you try and get the 7, and then the worst that can happen is obviously the other team ties the game. And if you happen to not get it, well, at least they're backed up on the 2-yard line. So the way that I actually want to criticize this is I don't think that it had nothing to do with the decision. The decision was right. But if you have Lamar Jackson at the 2-yard line, why are you not running the ball with Lamar Jackson? Like, to me, that was the part that kind of blew my mind. But I don't know. You guys saw that play. You guys saw that decision. Were there any things that you guys learned from that or takeaways that you guys had from that?
Yeah, I thought, it was like the worst possible outcome that could have happened was Lamar throwing the interception. That would happen, on 2 or 3% of plays in that situation. And yeah, I was with you on the play call. I thought it should have been some type of run either by Lamar or him handing it off because of the effect that he has on opposing defenses, even when he's not rushing himself. But it was, if you miss it and the Bills get the ball at, the 2-yard line there anyways, then there's a much higher chance you're going to force them to punt because of how limited their playbook is. So just it was really unlucky for John Harbaugh, I think, for, an interception that led to a touchback that put the ball at the 20-yard line, ending up being the outcome for the Ravens there. And that kind of, ended the game and gave the Bills the right field position to go down and score.
Yeah. Me and Tej kind of think in a very similar way. I think, like he said, the actual outcome of the play was probably a left tail end outcome where just bad variance, and the Bills gained 18 yards from that. But I think I do agree with the decision to go for it. The Ravens had been driving for 9 minutes, so it's more than likely that the Bills defense was going to be pretty tired, especially just after 3 goal line plays. So going for it was the right decision. Obviously, I think it's more important to evaluate the process and the results. And, as smart as the Ravens are, I think the one constant criticism from that organization has kind of been Greg Roman. So, the play call wasn't obviously optimal. You don't really want to be throwing there, especially against a pretty good pass defense like the Bills. But again, I think the process was right. And again, it's just a very unlucky result. But it kind of just shows how the Ravens think, and in most cases it will lead to a positive outcome than a negative outcome in the long run.
Brad, are we ever going to get to a point? What year is it when you don't immediately turn on a post-game show and you have 80-year-olds on the show criticizing coaches doing the smart mathematical decision? Or is that ever going to happen, do you think?
It probably isn't ever going to happen, but I also think these two guys nailed it where it's viewed as such a binary thing of touchdown or not. And like Arjun said, it was literally one of the worst possible outcomes to where part of the factor you're factoring the decision making is if we don't convert, they might have 1st and 10 at the 2-yard line. That's a big part of the decision. But of course that, no one thinks about that or talks through that. You just get this binary. Did they score? Did they not score? I will say, to play devil's advocate, I suppose a little bit just because of weather. It was pretty crappy weather. The wind was not solid. That's why it was a 2020 game that late in the game. That maybe would have swayed me a little bit. But the thing about Harbaugh is when he goes up there and gives a cogent explanation for why he thought through his process, that's why I'm comfortable with it every time, because you actually know he knows why he's doing what he's doing and what he's doing. And that, I think, you have to always trust the process over the result.
Yeah, it's kind of like the opposite of the Lions, where they just have vibes. The Lions are all vibes. It's absolutely hilarious. They've scored the most points. I think they're leading the league in points per game right now. They're 1-3, kind of exactly what we talked about earlier with Josh Hermsmeyer around the Dan Campbell effect. But really good point. You guys, I really appreciate jumping on the podcast. We'll have you on again soon. You guys can check, members of the printing press can go check your guys' content out, both on pff.com and the PFF app, as well as on Twitter. Some of the best data viz and data analysis that you'll find out there. So go check both these guys out, and we will see you all later on at some point on the podcast. We're going to do a little guess the lines here. Before I do, I'll remind you that you can go download the PFF app right now on the iOS App Store. Go type in PFF in the search bar and then download it and leave us a little review. I don't have any good ones from this past week, so maybe I need to go into the archives and find a few. But hashtag Printing Press 5-star review. If you have any good takes, I will read them here live on the podcast. Go download it. You'll get all of PFF's written analysis, our betting dashboards, and fantasy football rankings live in the palm of your hand at the tap of a button. So go download it right now and enjoy. All right, bring it on now. Ben Brown. If you don't know Ben Brown, members of the Printing Press may not be super familiar with Ben's work. You're missing out, but you also already are, because he is a big part of what PFF's betting models say. And obviously Eric and I reference those all the time here. It's on pff.com with PFF Greenline, on the PFF app as well. So Ben, it's great to have you on here. We used to do the NFL Daily or betting podcast, right, with PFF. I want to say it was on Saturdays that we used to do Saturday nights.
It was right? Saturday nights. Saturdays for the boys. Yeah, no, it was obviously a really good time. I know we've gone back and forth on a lot of betting content behind the scenes. I do think I did do one guest spot this last year on the forecast.
That's right.
Actually, as well. I did make my appearance, so got to be somewhat familiar. But yeah, there was a lot of locks of the week and stuff that I think were at least ran by me, I would say, to the point where it's like, hey, do you like this play as well or not? So I think, at least from that perspective, maybe a little bit of filter as well before the people really got the goods. So, but I'm definitely obviously excited to be here. Love the forecast. Check it out, twice weekly still. And I'm, obviously going to be a loyal subscriber and listener, as we continue forward here. So thanks for having me on.
An esteemed member of the press is what
I feel like if there's I know there was the presidential status and maybe Eric was vice president. I had to be right under there, right? Or something.
Yeah, you were a diamond medallion member.
Right.
Yeah, you get access to the club when you go to the airport. Ben, for anyone out there that is listening to Ben for the first time, is also a let's just say a degenerate of the highest order. And when I say
highest order,
yeah, I mean that this guy is betting player props in college football at a level that you're just not going to find out there. So if you're looking for action, Ben Brown has you covered.
I always have action. The days right now, Tuesday, Wednesday, are a little bit tough, but I would say that if you thought Eric Eager was a degen, then come on over to the dark side.
Yeah, you have no idea. And rocking a Lululemon hat, I might add today. You really brought some freshness here. I'm wearing a hat by a company called Vori, which is like a Lululemon knockoff, basically.
Okay, I was down in those streets a little bit doing my research, because I'm not honestly I have a very good woman, I would say, as my wife, and she does so much for me, and she does do a lot of my shopping and stuff, because I'm just not I'm too busy degenerating on stuff to actually be able to go to the mall or something like that. So all my clothes are just picked up from her. But I did come across this Vori company as well in her research as well. So.
It's good. I mean, we do recommendations on this podcast. I'll go ahead and throw out a recommendation here. I like it. It's basically Lululemon, but for guys. That's the whole premise of the company. Right. Which means that it's still expensive as shit.
Right.
So that's not a good thing. But let's guess some lines here. So we are obviously, Eric and I used to do this every single podcast on Sunday nights. We're going to keep doing this. We're going to add a little bit of structure here. We're going to track these. We'll share this with the printing press at some point. We can figure out how to make sure we can lock it down. But we're going to track these. We're going to then also say whether we would bet on the game. So obviously, if our line is different than what the actual line is, you have a hypothesis that's a little different than the market. Would you actually place that bet? Right? Sometimes you might say, oh, well, the market, I think this makes sense. I'm actually not going to bet this right now. But our goal is to provide value. Like this number at, and I'm going to go ahead and bet it now, get some of that closing line value. Of course, we'll write up our favorites, and that'll be live on pff.com and the PFF app tomorrow morning. So Thursday night, we have Indianapolis and Denver, two of the most despicable, disappointing teams on planet Earth. And all these lines are going to be courtesy of our friends over at BetMGM. So if you're following along and looking for where you can bet on these lines, that's where we had some feedback where it's like, hey, I never know where the hell to get these lines. Well, now you know. Let's go in this order here. Let's go Brad, Ben, and then I'll close it out. Brad, what'd you have this game at?
Yeah, right after we all declare the Broncos are dead, the Colts might be even more dead. I had Broncos laying a field goal at home in the altitude.
Ben, what about you?
I love the Broncos discussion earlier. I just have to throw that out there as well. But I would say Titans minus 1.5.
Sorry, say that again.
I want Titans minus 1.5 basically. So
it's Colts Broncos.
Oh my God, what is happening right now? I'm looking at the wrong game already. Okay. So I was looking at the Titans game basically today. I'm already screwing up the lines, guys. I'm sorry. I was looking at the Titans Colts game because I did bet the Titans today. Colts Broncos. Sorry, it was.
By the way, as you're finding that, Titans Colts was one of the games I felt best about. It's something the Green Line really liked. Titans plus 3.5 ended up being I think it was one of the 5 consensus picks in the Circa Millions contest. Most picked game this week. I think it was the only game that had over 2,000 selections. Only side that had over 2,000 selections so far this year was Vikings minus 2.5. Obviously that got out to 4 because of all the injuries, and that one just barely. I don't think the Vikings, one of the things I'm going to talk about here in a second, is I don't think the Vikings deserve to cover that game. Okay, Ben, did you find it? Would you have this line at?
Yeah, I like the Broncos minus 3.5.
Okay, minus 3.5. I have Broncos by a field goal here. I kind of initially had it 3.5, 3.5, and then I watched more of the Broncos game, and I was like, they stink. They're awful. So it doesn't necessarily feel right. On BetMGM, this is 3. It's minus 110 both sides. Ben, you're the only person that was different here. Are you going to take the Broncos?
I mean, after your guys' discussion on a little bit earlier, so I will be, completely transparent. I did lose more money on the Broncos, or I lost more money on the Broncos today than any other team. So I feel like I almost have to go back to the well here. I would bet the Broncos minus 3 one last time. I'm riding or dying with Russell Wilson. I'll take it. So I love pain. I mean, I don't know what to tell you.
You said ride or die.
Probably die. So
yeah, well, he wants you to ride, but so far it's been more death than otherwise. Alrighty, New York Giants, who pulled off an amazing, just scintillating victory over Brad's Bears, are going to Green Bay to play Packers. This one was fast. It is a fascinating game, but like both the wins by these teams today felt, let's just say not exactly amazing. So let's keep that same order. Brad, Ben, and then myself.
Yeah, so the 3-1 Giants have the most penalties in the NFL, third most drops. They have the 22nd offensive success rate, and they've allowed the 5th highest pressure percentage on Daniel Jones / Tyrod Taylor / Wildcat quarterback Saquon Barkley. So even as uninspiring as the Packers were, I had Green Bay laying 8 at home.
All righty. That seems fair. Ben, what about you?
I'm going Packers minus 6.5.
Okay.
I think it's a pretty decent line. And I'll say later what side I would bet on that one if I actually get the option. But
okay, I have the Packers by 7.5. I actually initially had this. So the way that I do it, I guess the lines before the game start, and then I adjust based on what I see today. I had this at 8.5, and I dropped it down to 7.5 because of barely beating Bailey Zappi. It is on BetMGM. It is Packers minus 7.5, minus 110 on both sides. So both you guys a little bit different than the line. Brad, are you going to bet on this one?
Yeah, I'll probably take the Packers 7.5.
What about you, Ben?
I mean, I might as well just bet this with Brad then, I guess. I'll take the Giants.
Yeah, you guys can just go to Brothrow and put some money on this.
An important caveat: I said it was at Packers. My apologies. It's in London, so we're getting
right.
up early again next weekend. Thank goodness, but that is an important caveat.
Yeah, no, that's fair. The thing that was so interesting to me, I guess, watching that Green Bay game is you obviously had Romeo Dobbs. I think he played pretty damn well in that game, but had that big drop at the end. There were a couple of opportunities for them to extend, and I almost feel like Bill Belichick gets like a power up when he has a really shitty quarterback playing. It's a backup, whatever. So there's a little bit of that at play. But let's just say this: they do not look like a team, the Packers, that are going to win by a massive number of points in any way, shape, or form. Even though I had the line dead on, I think if I were forced to pick one side of this, I would probably pick the Giants. And maybe the only thing that would keep me from that right now is that Daniel Jones got pretty banged up in that game, and they had to roll with Saquon in the Wildcat. And while that might have been their best offense against the Bears, I don't think that gets it done against the Packers. Detroit is playing in New England. Lions, Patriots. It looks like Hoyer's in the concussion protocol. Who knows if he's able to make it back? It won't be Mac Jones, though. So it could be Bailey Zappi. I don't think BetMGM has a line on this, but I'm sure we can find one. So let's guess it anyways. Brad, would you have this one at?
Yeah, so BetMGM does not have a line. As you mentioned, Brian Hoyer in concussion protocol. Bailey Zappi, I thought he was okay. I really think it was more the Patriots running the ball on the NFL's worst run defense still in 2022. Somehow Green Bay cannot figure this out. They've allowed the worst EPA per rush against so far this season. Long answer short, I had New England plus 1.5, but it's a lot to do with the quarterback.
Fair.
Yeah.
Ben, what about you?
I would say, I think that Detroit is way too public of a team right now. So I had it actually Detroit minus 2.5.
Interesting. I had where is this game here? I had New England -1. And the reason I put New England -1 is I was thinking back to Jared Goff versus Bill Belichick and not feeling particularly great about about the way that Jared Goff has played against Bill Belichick in the past. I guessed this initially thinking it'd be Brian Hoyer. I actually don't really know if I care whether it's Brian Hoyer or Bailey Zappi at this point. Or honestly, Mac Jones. Mac Jones has played not very well. Detroit is just a team right now that I don't know if you can feel really good about them in any situation other than betting the over. Like it's really the only thing. They have no defense whatsoever. So it's hard for me thinking that they're going to go on the road and Jared Goff's going to lead them to a convincing victory. Ben, do you see a line anywhere for this game?
Let me check here. I see minus 2.5, I think, for New England at our friends at DraftKings. Let me double check. I'm looking at a few odds screens, a few different ones, kind of my go-to for these sorts of things. But yeah, minus 2.5 from New England looks to be at least consensus.
Okay, wow.
So,
Brad, you had Lions getting 1.5. So are you betting on the Lions?
Yeah, the biggest discrepancy here, I probably am. I mean, they've the dead last in EPA per play allowed. Obviously, the defense has been terrible, but third in yards before contact, they've been running the ball like crazy. They obviously could get back Amon-Ra St. Brown, DJ Chark, maybe DeAndre Swift for this game. I would take them, even though Matt Patricia revenge game against Detroit.
Yeah, I don't know what that means. I think I'm kind of with you there. I think the play here, though, for my money, would be teasing this out, getting that plus 8.5 if you're the Lions here, and even if they're down, at the end of the game they find a way to kind of backdoor it for you. So I think that's where I would go if I had to bet this. What about you, Ben?
Yeah, I mean, I don't see Detroit losing by more than a touchdown here too often. I know it's going to be chaotic in order for them to actually get there. But yeah, I do really like a teaser in this spot. There are, I think, probably going to be some other options as well, just looking at my numbers. But yeah, I think the teaser is the correct play. If not, I'm totally fine taking Detroit on the money line in this spot as well.
Okay. Moving right along. Pittsburgh Buffalo. I thought that I was going to maybe be a little strong here, but I don't think that I will be. Brad, what'd you have?
Yeah, I had the Bills minus 14 here. I mean, the Steelers are just awful. I think, again, Vegas kind of showed you what they think. They were minus 3 most of the week with the Zach Wilson returning for the game. I think they did close minus 3.5, but nevertheless, made the quarterback switch, obviously, to Kenny Pickett. I thought it was funny. Minimum 10 attempts at quarterback. He has the highest yards per attempt. Kenny Pickett does now, and Trubisky is 38th out of 39 quarterbacks with 5.5 yards per attempt. So small sample size, kind of kidding, but nevertheless, either way, I think the Bills are going to blow out the Pittsburgh Steelers.
Ben, what about you?
I went minus 10.5 for Buffalo. I do think I was a little light. I thought there would maybe be a little bit of an adjustment with Kenny Pickett now being the starting quarterback. So I thought maybe that would be a reason why Pittsburgh would be a little bit short. And I think, Mike Tomlin still seems to be somewhat priced into the betting market as being this kind of guy that can, coach up his team and especially some of these wider spreads. So I thought it'd be a little bit light. I definitely do not want to be betting the Steelers really at like plus 14 or anything like that. But I basically made this number what I would really like to bet the Bills. And it's just an unrealistic expectation, probably more than anything else. So.
Yeah, I'm a little light too. I had 12.5, and gosh, I mean, Kenny Pickett can't be worse than Mitchell Trubisky,
right?
So that was kind of my hypothesis there. Actually, watching that, he had a bunch of interceptions in that game, but they were trying to mount, a little bit of a comeback there at the end. Needed to throw the ball. It's hard for me to say that those interceptions make me feel poorly about his game because he completed the other 10 passes that weren't intercepted. And actually made some nice, yeah, exactly. Made some nice throws, but this is minus 13.5 trending in your direction though, Brad, because it's 13.5 minus 115 to bet the Bills side of that. So this might get to 14 before it comes down at all. So I guess the question really is for Ben and I, are we going to bet on Kenny Pickett and the freaking Steelers in Buffalo at 10 a.m. next Sunday? Ben, what about you?
I'm not going to. I actually was trying to think about this because I know we had the whole, Steelers betting fiasco thing. I don't think I've bet on the Steelers in like a year and a half, and I'm definitely not going to start here in week 5. I'll say that much. So when was the last time you bet on the Steelers, George? There was one last spot last year, I think, right?
Unfortunately. So yes, I'm well known for saying that they were the most overrated team in the NFL when they were undefeated. And that did very well. Unfortunately, I had them in the circa millions this week.
Oh, really?
The hypothesis there was Zach Wilson coming back on the road against the Steelers. Like the chance of implosion was high, and little did I know that that motherfucker was going to come through. So pun intended, which makes me a little gun shy here. Obviously, I would just say this: rookie quarterback, first start on the road against a team like the Buffalo Bills that is getting a little bit healthier. Right. And has played some tough teams of late, right? They've played both Baltimore on the road and Miami, both challenging games. They come home. It's about time for them to kind of get right. And so, I'm a little hesitant here to bet this big of a number. So I'm actually going to stay away from this one. Even though I do see, it does make sense. I think Tomlin being priced in as a guy that's not going to get, embarrassed here. But when you have a rookie quarterback out there, and by the way, he hasn't made a claim as to whether it's going to be Pickett or Trubisky, which I think is pretty funny. So we'll see. Moving right along, we've got Chargers, Browns. This one is in Cleveland. Brad, what'd you have there?
I had, let's see, LAC Cle. Where am I? I had Cleveland -1, and I think I'm going to be wrong on this one.
I think you're going to be wrong as well. Ben, what do you have?
I got Chargers -1, basically. I do think the market expectation, obviously there was a little bit of a question mark with their game against Texans this week. Texans maybe made a little bit of a valiant effort there toward the end, but I think the Chargers showed some things. Does look like Justin Herbert's a lot more healthy, and they're all, for the most part, the guys that they are going to get back are kind of trended in the right direction. So I think the Chargers will be slight favorites here on the road when it's all said and done.
Yeah, I couldn't get it out to 3, and I actually also wanted to teaser protect this one as my own fake sports book. So I have it as 1. The Browns getting a point at home. And, you know, there's a little bit of like the kind of zigzag theory of gambling here with the Chargers, where they go out and they, you know, get blown out by the Jaguars. Oh my God, you know, Jaguars are amazing. But then the Chargers go and they have this kind of get right game against the Texans, which, by the way, the Texans made kind of close there at the end. But the Texans are, I mean, they're not a good team. The Browns, however, Arjun mentioned this during the show, actually, kind of, you know, can they really dominate up front? Chargers a little bit banged up there. No Joey Bosa, no Rashawn Slater. This is in Cleveland. And so at 10 a.m. So, you know, I kind of do like the Browns here. So this one is Chargers minus a full 3. Now, it is -3, -105. So maybe this does get down to 2. I'll say that I think this is going to be the first one that I'm actually going to bet on. I would take Cleveland +3. Jacoby Brissett has played really well. The Cleveland offense is not, I think, nearly as bad as maybe it's being advertised to be. What about you guys?
The Cleveland offense is good. The issue is their defense. I mean, their run defense got gashed again today. They're the 3rd worst early down EPA per rush defense. They also allowed 70% success rate on dropbacks for Marcus Mariota today, the worst of anyone in week 4. So, yeah, they can score. They just can't stop anyone. And then you mentioned Arjun talking about no Myles Garrett, no Jadeveon Clowney, but they came into this season. I think the biggest weakness on Cleveland was their interior defensive line, and they've been getting gashed, had some injuries at linebacker. So, I don't know if I would bet it. I probably would bet it, seeing as I had the Browns favored. But maybe we're talking over because we like both offensive, you know, trench matchups for both offenses.
Total 48.5, by the way.
I love what Brad actually said there. I do think that the key for me, especially with the Browns defense, is Denzel Ward. I know he had an interception this week. I haven't looked at, you know, the entire game that he had as far as, you know, coverage snaps perspective, but he's been pretty poor. And I do think if they don't have that guy kind of as like a shutdown cornerback, it does expose a lot of things for the rest of that defense. So I'd be worried that, you know, Justin Herbert's going to be able to take advantage of that Browns defense. So I would probably lean, you know, in the Chargers direction, but I don't want to lay, you know, a field goal differential basically on the road here in the spot. So it's probably an avoid for me, if anything else.
Alrighty. Moving on. Let's do see here. What's next? Looking forward to this game. Bears Vikings. Brad, would you make this one?
Yeah, so Minnesota and New Orleans, pretty interesting. Neither elected to use the bye coming back from London, so that is definitely going to be a factor here, obviously. I mean, the Vikings are just the classic Vikings. Kirk is their 2nd highest grade on play action, is pretty pedestrian otherwise. Their defense is 29th in pressure percentage right now, just cannot generate a pass rush. All that long answer said, I had Minnesota -7 in this game, even with London being factored into the equation.
Yeah, I would say Vikings -6.5 is where I had the number at, and I don't think there's any chance that they actually cover that. But we'll see. I don't really want to bet the Bears either. So this is just this is just a painful spot to talk about, I would say. So we'll see what happens. But take us home, George, on this one. I gotta forget this game's even happening.
I have this is tough. I have Vikings -5.5. Part of this is me just wanting to fade the Minnesota Vikings. They won a game in London against a brutally banged up New Orleans Saints team. I mean, the Saints were a complete mash unit. Andy Dalton was the quarterback. Let's not forget, Andy Dalton did once play for the Bears, and it wasn't particularly pretty. I guess the thing that, you know, is obviously really challenging here is that the Bears passing offense is a nightmare. And so, you know, they're not going to be able to expose the Vikings here. But all of that said, like, the Vikings, in my opinion, should not be favored by a full touchdown in this game, which is what it is. It is Minnesota -7 here. They also are coming back, as you mentioned, from London. The Bears are not. So I'll just say this. I will take the Bears getting a full 7 right now. And I will then hold my nose and cover my eyes and pray. What about you, Ben?
Go ahead, Ben.
I definitely think the only side I would ever bet in this game is the Bears. It's not going to be enjoyable, but I do think 7 is actually probably going to be the best of the number here. So I do think if you're interested in getting some closing line value and stuff, +7 is is a pretty reasonable play, I would say, at this point, given that price. So.
Yeah, I also wouldn't bet it. I don't think either side. But yeah, you mentioned Dalton. He even wasn't terrible. The Saints had a muffed punt, another turnover in their own territory, and like 7 penalties for like 90-something yards. I mean, they kept shooting themselves in the foot the entire game and still almost won the game, almost tied it up with the double doink from Will Lutz. So the one thing I would say for the Bears is they can probably run the ball Latavius Murray, fresh off the practice squad, was running for 8 yards a clip against the Vikings today. So maybe Khalil Herbert has a Khalil Herbert game. That's about all Chicago probably could do.
Yeah. So the other thing that was really funny about the Minnesota Vikings is they had they took advantage of 2 fumbles to the tune of 6 points.
Right.
Was it the first half of that game? And it was just such a, you thought about the way that Minnesota kind of dominated the game from a time possession standpoint and like from defense standpoint, all that stuff. And they could not extend on that team. Kevin O'Connell, I really like what he does offensively, but he's got that Sean McVay in him where it's like, I will kick field goals on 4th and short. So yeah, it's a good point. I famous last words, like the Bears here. By the way, Brad is, I think, fairly handily in the lead right now in terms of guessing the lines correctly. I don't know how. Yeah, I guess we just have to sum the difference up at the end. And
mean square error.
I was going to say, yeah.
Fine, so.
Yeah, definitely mean squared. All right, Seahawks Saints. Speaking of the Saints, this is in New Orleans. Brad, would you have this one at?
Yeah, so let's see here. I had New Orleans laying 4. Like I said, also coming back from London. It's kind of a question because we don't know Jameis Winston, Michael Thomas. So kind of question marks there, but yeah, I had them laying 4.
Yeah, I had a -3 basically for all those reasons. I do think that the fact that those guys went and traveled, to London or whatever and didn't actually end up playing, I do think at least speaks to the fact that they should be very close to playing this week. But I think at least early on in the week, we're going to see probably a little bit of a lower number in the Saints direction than what we'll probably finish out with, especially if we do get some positive, injury news coming up later in the week. So give me Saints -3. I don't actually know where this number is at either here. So.
Yeah, I wanted to make this 3. I really did. Seattle 5th in EPA per pass play right now. The New Orleans Saints are 24th. It's not particularly great, but Chris Olave is starting to come together. They're going to get a little bit healthier. They do still have some talent on defense that, the Seattle Seahawks just simply don't have. But I landed on 4 here. It is 4.5 right now, -110 on both sides. So, I bet the Seahawks this week. This was one of the ones that we wrote up last week. It was one of my Circa Millions picks. I really do like the Seahawks. I mean, they're playing really well, especially, not defensively. I think they're the worst defense in EPA per pass play allowed, but offensively, they have been really solid. Am I nervous about Geno Smith on the road in New Orleans? Absolutely. But then when you think about whether he's either playing a banged up Jameis Winston or Andy Dalton, it makes me feel a heck of a lot better. So I do think I would grab the 4.5 here, even though you're buying Seattle kind of at the top of the market. I think New Orleans still has a bunch of question marks. I think they still miss Sean Payton quite a bit. What about you guys?
Yeah, Geno has a top 5 passing grade for us against the blitz, in a clean pocket, on play action, and no play action, no screens. He's top 5 in all of those separately. But what scares me is today they were 9 of 12 on third down. Average net yardage converted on those third downs was 8.8 yards. So a lot of way behind the chains and just kind of not fluky, but some big time conversions. And I think the weird stat for this game is the Seahawks are 31st in pass or 30th in pass rush win rate, and the Saints are 31st, just not generating pressure. Maybe that bodes in favor of the Seahawks. The metrics look better, but I think that third down for me and just the Saints defense, what they did still against the Minnesota Vikings today, it could be just an ugly, ugly game, and they win, by 6 or something.
Yeah, I think it's going to be an ugly game, but I also think that kind of, caters to Seattle. So I would definitely bet Seattle +4.5 here. I do think they'll have at least some success with Rashad Penny. He broke a couple runs against a really bad Detroit front four, I would say right now, especially against the run. So I like that. I would push back a little bit on Seahawks not having any coverage players. I think Tariq Woolen
Yeah.
is kind of a playmaker right now, right? I think he's had 2 interceptions the last 2 games, had the return pick 6 as well today. So he's a guy, I think he's, kind of emerging as this Pete Carroll-esque sort of cornerback. And I think he's, an exciting prospect for what they have in the secondary. So I like Seattle a little bit. They've been, sneaky so far this year. So I'll ride them again here, plus 4.5.
By the way, DK Metcalf came out and said that Jeff Okudah is a little overrated. And DK Metcalf put up 100 on Jeff Okudah while needing to take a shit today, which I thought was low-key one of the most incredible things that I saw. Needing to get carted off, by the way, it means you really need to go to the bathroom. And it's just, I mean, it's like one of those things where you look at DK Metcalf and you're like, this dude's superhuman. He could do anything. And that includes like destroying another top, flight athlete while needing to go to the bathroom. Absolutely incredible. And he gets Marshawn Lattimore this week. And Justin Jefferson, torched Marshawn Lattimore. It was one of the biggest mismatches that we had on the PFF app. Over 6.5 receptions, an absolute lock. And I would expect DK Metcalf to have some success there as well. We've seen Marshawn Lattimore struggle a little bit against, Mike Evans in some situations. So, anyways, I do like that one. All right, moving right along here. Next up, Dolphins Jets. Back in New York, Zach Wilson. Brad, would you have this one at?
Yeah, so again, we don't necessarily know. I know the Dolphins get a long week, but maybe some question marks about Tua Tagovailoa. At the same time, how big of a downgrade on the spread is Teddy Bridgewater?
Yeah.
Might not be that big of a downgrade. I had the Jets getting plus 4.5 at home.
Oh, wow. Ben, what about you?
I had the Jets plus 2.5 at home. Basically, I do, and that was no Tua, but Teddy Bridgewater is definitely like a cover machine basically throughout his entire career. So I didn't want to go too aggressively in the opposite side, but we'll see. I could be a little light on that one as well, but I like Zach Wilson. I like the Jets this weekend against the Steelers. Definitely came through, and I do think kind of showed the ability to kind of win some of those close games. So we'll see where this one's actually at.
Yeah, I guess the worry that I would have here, so I have Jets getting 3 at home. I'm not that concerned about Teddy Bridgewater in this game, but I would be a little concerned about the Dolphins defense, a little bit more aggressive. Obviously, the Steelers don't have TJ Watt, so that helps them out a little bit as well. But yeah, in this situation where I think the Dolphins are going to have a little more success being able to put up some points with Tyreek and Waddle, I'd be a little more hesitant on Wilson. But that said, 3, I think 3 is the right number, and I'm just staying away from this one. Brad, you had 4.5 though, so are you inclined here?
I will bet. This is my first bet in a while. Yes, I would bet this one. Jets offensive line, 3rd worst pressure percentage allowed. And today, Elijah Vera Tucker, their first rounder from last year, kicked out from right guard to left tackle for 44 snaps. Actually held up decently well. 66 pass block rate, only allowed 3 pressures. But they're down to their 5th tackle, who is actually their starting right guard. So that's how dire it is. And then Wilson, great 4th quarter, 11 of 13 for 128 yards and a touchdown. Was great on throws downfield, 10+ yards, 8 of 12 for 170 yards. But tied Justin Fields' slowest time to throw, 3.4 second average time to throw. This Miami pass rush, Jalen Phillips, Melvin Ingram, all these guys, Emmanuel Ogbah have been getting after the quarterback with ease. Christian Wilkins up the middle. I would take Miami. Even if it's Teddy, I think I still take it.
Yeah. I would like to know the status of Xavier Howard before really locking in the Jets basically at +3 here. But if I got confirmation that he was out, we'll see if that actually happens. But I know he's dealing with the groin injury, missed some snaps basically on Thursday night. So maybe the long rest will do him good. But I do think he's at least somewhat key to helping this Miami Dolphins secondary. So I'm taking a wait and see approach. Might lock in the Jets if they move off this 3-point number, though.
Titans Commanders, another exquisite game in the 10 o'clock slate here. Brad, would you have this one at?
I tried not to overreact. I had Washington plus 1.5 here. Try to keep it under a field goal. I mean, they're obviously awful. They're now dead last in EPA per play on offense and bottom 10 on defense. Carson Wentz has taken the most sacks in the NFL now at 17, and I think a lot of those are his fault. Yeah. All of that said, try not to overreact to today's games. Thought it would stay under a field goal in Washington.
Yeah, I'm gonna overreact maybe to these games this weekend, but I like the Titans. They came through for me. I think minus 3.5 is where I basically had the Titans at. The Commanders have been, outside of week one, I think one of, if not the worst teams in football. Did not show out whatsoever again today. So I'm actively looking to fade them as much as I can coming up here. So I would say Titans minus 3.5.
I didn't go nearly as strong as you guys did, mostly because I just think the Titans are not very good either. So this is less about the Commanders and more about the fact that I just think both these teams kind of stink. But the question needs to be asked whether the Commanders are going to, is it Taylor Heineke? Is he still the backup in Washington? Like, Wentz looks absolutely terrible. And to your point, Brad, just takes so many sacks and kills your drives. So that said, I had Washington favored in this game by 2.5. It is not the case. Washington is a 2.5 point underdog, and it looks like it is trending the other way. The Titans minus 2.5 is minus 115. So I am off there. Does this mean that I will bet the Washington Commanders? I think it does. The Colts, guys, the Colts are terrible. The Colts suck. And so the Titans winning that game by 7, just to me, is not something that I'm going to overreact to. This one is in Washington. I will say this. I think this is, like, if Carson Wentz can't pull this together, then I think they've got to look elsewhere. But, like, Terry McLaurin has 15 receiving yards in this game. The nicest throw that Carson Wentz made was to Trayvon Diggs. I mean, he threw a dime to Trayvon Diggs down the left sideline. Trayvon Diggs didn't even look at the receiver. He literally just ran a go route, and Carson Wentz dropped it in his breadbasket. So I think he's got to sort of figure it out in this game. Remember, Carson Wentz is absolutely god-awful when it matters. He was terrible in the revenge game against Philadelphia. Here's a game in Dallas against a divisional opponent. This game, it's Tennessee Titans. So I will take them here. I would say this, given that it's 2.5, Ben, you mentioned this. I like this as a teaser leg, thinking about Detroit plus 8.5 and Washington plus 8.5. But what about you guys?
Yeah, I'm going with Tennessee here one more week. I maybe have been more impressed than what I should be at this point, but I think the Raiders are the third best team in the AFC West, which is still saying something. Kind of got off to a rocky start, but I do think their win today kind of impresses me a little bit for what Tennessee did to them 2 weeks ago. So I like the Titans, and I think anything before a field goal, I would definitely be laying it with them. So this is a bet for me, maybe versus George, something like a steak dinner or something we could see coming up here. So the steak dinner has been.
I still have like 45 steak dinners from that. Little known fact: one of the reasons that Eric had to leave PFF was he couldn't
the steak dinners.
Jeff Ruby's. He just had to escape it.
Right. Exactly. By the way, we've gotten some nice shout outs in the chat for our man Eric, who told me he's going to be listening tonight. And if he is, we love you, we miss you, and hopefully you're still alive after that Chiefs victory. I can just see Eric just laying on the couch, drowning himself in champagne at the moment, because they're clearly going to win the Super Bowl now. Let's go to the next game, which is and talking about the AFC South matchup of greatness. Davis Mills and the Houston Texans going to Jacksonville to play Trevor Lawrence. Trevor Lawrence fumbled 4 times, lost all 4 of them, and threw an interception against the Eagles, and they only lost that game by 1 possession, which was ridiculous. Brad, what did you make this spread?
Yeah, like I said, Lawrence losing 4 fumbles, the first time that's happened in a century. So cool little stat there. But he still has the 5th best clean pocket passing grade for us, and their defense is still 5th in EPA per play allowed. And they play Justin Herbert, Matt Ryan, who I guess is bad, and Jalen Hurts, obviously some bad weather. Long answer short, I had the Jaguars laying a full touchdown in this game.
Wow. Ben?
Yeah, I was at Jacksonville, basically minus 6.5. I do still think they are a good team. Didn't obviously show it in the rain, like Brad said, basically today. But I'm a little light, I think, on them basically right now. But I do think minus 6.5 makes a lot of sense given the plucky nature that we've seen from Houston the first few weeks of the season.
Yeah, I'm with you, Ben. I could not make this a full 7. And I say that like watching Davis Mills can be really, really painful, especially on the road. It was interesting. I was talking to Darius Butler about this Eagles Jaguars game. And as I was preparing for it, I was looking at the Jaguars defense. Like their corners have been really solid. Tyson Campbell, Shaq Griffin, both top 35 graded corners there. Josh Allen has been really fantastic at edge rusher. He's a top 10 graded pass rusher so far this year. So they've played well defensively. Houston today took advantage of a really long Dameon Pierce run to kind of get themselves back into it. But they showed some fight. And, they played a team that kind of had to show up in the Los Angeles Chargers. They're going to be playing a team here in Jacksonville, again, that sort of has to kind of show up in this game. So I don't love it. I think if I had to bet one side, I definitely would take Houston getting a full touchdown. This isn't one that I feel super strongly about. Ben, I don't know. You had 6.5 as well. So I'm curious what you think about this.
Yeah, I am kind of with you on that. I do think that we'll probably see the line move further out in Jacksonville's direction as we get later into the week. So I don't think I need to lock in 7.5. 7 basically right now, because I do think 7.5 could easily be coming here, and I don't really see it coming down to 6.5, and I'd miss out on the bet entirely. So I'm probably taking a wait and see approach. I think later on in the week, what I don't mind doing is some sort of like teaser with Jacksonville if they do get down, or if they do get to that 7.5 range, basically down to 1, and then maybe taking Texans on the other side and trying to hit a middle or something like that. That would maybe be the play that I could think of, but I don't really want to take a naked Houston right now, I would say.
Brad, you nailed 7, so I take it you're not betting either side of this game.
No, I'm not touching either side. You mentioned how the Jaguars may need to win, but they're also coming off, I think, a ridiculously emotional game with Doug Peterson going back to Philadelphia. Did a jersey swap after the game with Jason Kelsey with his pullover. But yeah, I just beating the Chargers out west. I think it's their franchise's first win in the Pacific time zone. I think I read that somewhere. Then you come back, go to your old coach's team. I think they'll probably win, but I could see it being by a field goal.
Yeah. That's very fair. All righty. We have a couple more in this early slate here. Atlanta, Tampa Bay. This is in Tampa. Ben, would you have this one at? Or sorry, Brad. I'm messing up the order. Getting the feng shui all messed up. Brad, would you have this one at?
Yeah, so I don't know if this one's out yet, but I figured Tampa Bay didn't look great tonight, but I still had a -8. I know Atlanta won again today. I think Tampa Bay is getting healthy at the right time now. Mike Evans, obviously 2 touchdowns tonight, looked good. Donovan Smith came back and I think held up well against the Chiefs tonight. Atlanta has maybe the worst pass rush in the NFL. I think they're talk about a team that needs to win and win big. I think it's Tampa Bay -8 would be my guess.
Yeah, I had Tampa Bay -10.5 for a lot of the reasons why Brad just mentioned. Rebound spot, obviously coming off of, a primetime game kind of meltdown in a lot of situations. Little concerned about, the Chris Godwin injury situation. Was obviously good to see him back out there. So like Brad said, they seem to be getting healthy at the right time. I do think, the kickoff fumble recovery, obviously, foreshadowed a completely different game than what they probably projected against the Chiefs tonight. So I think from that perspective, they're still a good team. They're one that I want to buy into. And I think, -10.5 makes a lot of sense for this particular spread.
I don't see this on BetMGM, but I'm seeing 8.5 out there. I had this at 7.5. And it's interesting. I actually had this 6.5 before the games kicked today. Atlanta did not impress, even though they were able to cover that game, and they're the only team in the NFL that is 4-0 against the spread thus far. But Marcus Mariota completed was like seven passes. Tampa Bay today, obviously fumbled the opening kickoff, and that puts you behind the 8 ball against Patrick Mahomes. Patrick Mahomes had like 3 to 4 plays where 99% of the time another quarterback makes that and it turns into an interception.
Right.
These all went right for them. But their receivers being healthy make them a very, very good team. And the only thing that would make me a little nervous here is Tom Brady maybe being a little banged up. He was like grabbing his right shoulder after he got sacked and fumbled, but came back and was throwing lasers. So even though I'm a little short here at 7.5, I'm not yet ready to bet Atlanta in this spot. I actually like Tampa teased down from 8.5 to 2.5 through both 7 and 3 as one of the things that I think I would like to bet here. You had this at 10.5 though, Ben. So are you taking 8.5?
I would probably strongly consider taking 8.5, but I think I'm more in agreement with you that I think it's the perfect teaser leg down to 1.5 basically. So if I have it at 10.5 and I can tease it from, through 7 and 3 as well, I'm getting basically, the 3 most important numbers that you possibly want there. So I think the teaser is the correct leg with Detroit probably right now would be my preferred play. And I think that's, what I'm going to end up probably locking in here as soon as we're done with this podcast.
Brad, what about you?
Yeah, 100%. I will irresponsibly tease this game probably with 2 or 3 other games. I just said Atlanta, only team in the NFL with 0 drops per charting so far.
Wow.
They're 4th in explosive runs. The Buccaneers have a great run defense. I just don't think they win in the way that Tampa Bay plays well. You mentioned their 4-0 ATS. Maybe there's a bit of a correction. But I am afraid to lay over a touchdown. So I think I'll just tease it with Detroit for sure. Maybe a couple other games as well.
Yeah, they still can't figure out how to use Kyle Pitts, which is
weird.
Really weird and fairly concerning. All right, San Francisco, Carolina. This is the afternoon slate. Afternoon slate, as it was this past week or this week, just 3 games. And in this slate, they're, I guess, equally as bad. But we start out with San Francisco going to play the disgusting Carolina Panthers. Matt Rule. My God, I don't know who's worse, him or Baker Mayfield. Brad, what'd you make this line?
Yeah, so I mentioned earlier kind of how I was surprised that Vegas respected San Fran so much, then went to Denver, were favored. I'm trying not to overreact here. They're obviously playing on Monday and then going to Sunday. Carolina is awful, like you mentioned. I saw earlier today from Tom Pelissero. Matt Rule is now 1-26 if the opponent scores at least 17 points against them. So you score 17 on them, you're going to win the game pretty much. Baker, 6.3 yards per attempt, is 32nd. 50.9 PFF passing grade on first review is 37th in the NFL. That being said, I tried not to freak out. I went Carolina plus 3.5.
Okay.
Wow. Carolina is so bad. Like Arizona tried to give them that game today and they couldn't even take it still, right? Like I think it was one of the worst performances of a team that I've seen at the National Football League level in quite some time. And it was bad. So I had this game. I had this one San Francisco -7 basically. So I feel like I got to be high there, but I also think there's like an expectation of the Kyle Shanahan San Francisco angle, like Brad mentioned a little bit, kind of baked into the betting market already. And I think that's going to be pretty pronounced in this match against Carolina as well.
Yeah. By the way, shout out Dave Solfaro, who dug up some pretty good data points for this week. And one of my favorite ones is Baker Mayfield throwing deep 20+ yards downfield. Today he was 0-3, 1 interception. I mean, it's like every time he drops back, you're like, look, if this dude wants to throw it deep, like may God be with you, because it's not going to be particularly pretty. What's amazing to me is that Christian McCaffrey manages to still be a stud in an offense where you're just like, he's the only person that you're remotely worried about. But man, I just wonder, Baker has looked so poor. And Darnold is over there on the bench. I mean, I guess you saw what you had from him last year, but can it be worse than Baker? Do you put him in there just to mix it up a little bit? I feel like Matt Rule is going to have to try something because at the end of the day, it's going to be, I think, his ass on the line. I made this 4.5, Panthers plus 4.5. The only angle to this that I would bet would be San Francisco. But here's the problem with San Francisco. No Trent Williams really concerns me. It's why I like the Rams on Monday night. I had the Rams in a teaser out to plus 7.5. I just without without Trent Williams, I'm very concerned about that offense. So I would wait to see how that looks before I bet on this game. What about you guys? Any way that you bet this? I mean, Ben, you had this at 7, so you got to make a play here, right?
Yeah, I'm definitely going to be on San Francisco. I do think you bring up a really good point, though, as well, because I do like the Rams tomorrow. Maybe we get down to like a 4-point spread in this particular game if San Francisco does look really bad. But if that does happen, I will still be buying into San Francisco. So the only question for me is, am I betting this right now, or am I betting it tomorrow at this time? Basically, is the only real question I have left in my mind right now. But I will be on San Francisco at some point.
Brad, are you grabbing that 4.5 or what?
I don't know if I love it. I mean, you mentioned the score. It could be the under. But yeah, Brian Burns has been great for the Panthers so far without Trent Williams. They also, I mean, the OL across the board, the center, Jake Brendel, the rookie, has been shaky. It's a bit of a scary game. This is even gambling analysis, but I have to throw in because you mentioned Christian McCaffrey, how he's the only weapon. If you haven't seen the video of a reporter asking DJ Moore, he goes, Matt Rule told us that it's not just Baker Mayfield. You guys also have to get open. DJ Moore's restraint and not saying anything is one of the more impressive feats I've seen in a long time. He just kind of has this grin of like, you just gave me a $20 million signing bonus. I'm not going to air out the quarterback in week 3. But it was impressive from DJ Moore not to just kind of freak out.
They got DJ Moore, by the way. Like, you could tell they were like, all right, we got to get DJ the ball here. Like, the guy's going to explode at some point and just like tear us all apart. So we got to get him the ball. They got him, a few targets in the game today. It's just so unimpressive. The thing about Carolina that I think, they played a Cardinals team that was one of the most anemic offenses on planet Earth, and also was just totally, a disaster when it came to the defensive side of the ball as well. And so for the Panthers at home to be that bad really says something, because the Cardinals, who we're going to talk about here in a second, have not been impressive either. Philly, Arizona, this one's in Phoenix. Brad, what'd you make this one?
Yeah, I had Arizona getting 4.5 here. You mentioned how bad Arizona was. They really were, not only just on the field, but also Cliff Kingsbury. I want to say they had like a 2nd and goal from outside the 10-yard line. He called a QB draw to Kyler Murray for 2 yards. Like just the most bizarre play calling you've seen in a long time. They're just not a good football team, really at all. So, anyways, yeah, I had Philly Philly laying 4.5 at Arizona.
Yeah, I had Philly 6.5 basically for all the reasons that Brad just said. I mean, Arizona's a bad football team, but the other side of it is Philadelphia looks like I kind of liked Jacksonville, especially given like the weather considerations and everything else this weekend, and Philadelphia took care of business once again. So I'm not really inclined to try to fade them until I maybe see a slip up. But until then, I would definitely be on the bullish side from the Philadelphia Eagles perspective.
Yes, I'm seeing this at 5.5, in some places 6. Already, I have this at 3.5. And maybe I'm missing something. I just, Arizona playing at home, and Philly making the trip. Am I sold on Philly yet? Philly, I think, is a really, really good team, but I don't know that there are any amazing teams this year. I thought Jalen Hurts, for the first time, he had the number 1 PFF passing grade in the NFL coming into this game, but it was not as good of a performance today as it had been in the past. And Arizona, in order to keep pace in any way, shape, or form in that division, they have to kind of start giving it their all here. So I had this at 3.5. Given that I'm a little bit short, it's 5.5, 6. I guess I would be inclined to bet Arizona at that number. But the idea of sitting there at 1:30 p.m. having to root for Cliff Kingsbury makes me want to just not even go through a Sunday of NFL football. So I think that's the right side. Although I'm interested, Ben, you had this all the way across 6 at 6.5. So would you take Philly here?
I would probably strongly consider Philly. I know it's 5.5, so the 6 definitely matters from that perspective. So yeah, I would actually take it. I guess I'm more of a believer in Philadelphia than what you are right now. I thought maybe they're one questionable spot headed into the season was Jalen Hurts. I think he's greatly exceeded everyone's expectations so far, and not really had to do it with his rushing ability. Has been really good from a downfield passing perspective. So I don't see anything that's stopping him. So yeah, I would definitely take Philadelphia 5.5 going into the desert.
What about you, Brad?
Yeah, I wouldn't bet either side. Obviously, I had Arizona getting fewer points, so this kind of sounds bizarre what I'm about to say, but I think Philly is a significantly better football team. I also think they match up very well. Something that intrigued me about them coming into the year was they kind of took throw a bunch of resources at the pass rush and not invest in one player, and it's paying off so far. And I think it's a terrible matchup for Arizona where they can kind of have Kyler know to run one way and avoid a certain pass rusher if it's one guy. Right now, the Eagles are top 10 in pass rush win rate. They're second in sacks. And then Fletcher Cox, Brandon Graham, Josh Sweat, and Hassan Reddick all have 9+ pressures, at least 2.5 sacks. That doesn't include Javon Hargrave, doesn't include, all these guys they have. And I think just them throwing bodies at Kyler Murray from every which way, I think is just a terrible matchup for Arizona. Long answer short, though, I don't think I'm betting it either way.
It is. I feel like there's not – you look at the Arizona Cardinals and their team stinks top to bottom. There's not really a good matchup for them, right? Like it's just maybe they'll play the Lions at some point. The Lions are the only team that are a good matchup for everybody.
Yeah.
The Panthers. That's a good point. Dallas and Los Angeles. The Rams in Los Angeles. Brad, would you make this?
Yeah, so I put a star on this one. I think Dak Prescott really could play, but I'm going to guess this line and guessing he's not going to play. So I had the Rams laying 6.5 against Cooper Rush.
Yeah, I went the opposite way as Brad. I do think that we're probably going to see Dak Prescott at least be available in this particular one. So I went the Rams -3.5.
Well, here's an interesting question. I think it makes sense that Dak rushes himself back, pun intended. I mean, the Dallas Cowboys have looked decent. It's not as if Cooper Rush has played to Dak Prescott levels of goodness, but he and CeeDee Lamb are on the same page. Noah Brown all of a sudden is showing up. Michael Gallup showed up today. It's not as if they have beaten the most impressive of teams here. The Rams will be by far the best team that they have played since Cooper Rush took over here. And I'm not suggesting that they should consider benching Dak Prescott here. So I could see him making a return. And if he does, I would be a little nervous because I think he might be coming back a little early. I made this Rams -4.5. My assumption as well is that Dak comes back. And, if so, might be a little rusty here. I am seeing, I think it looks like there's some places that don't have a lineup because of that. What I'm seeing is Rams -6. So that would lead me to believe that people think that it'll be Cooper Rush once again. And maybe Dallas feels they can leave Rush in because he's had success and they don't want to rush, Dak back after they've won 3 straight. But I made this Rams -4.5. It's Cooper Rush and I'm getting 6. I don't know. I don't think I could pull the trigger on it because I'm not going to buy Cooper Rush at the top of the market at the end of the day.
Yeah, maybe I'll make you feel better with this, even though it is literally buying at the peak. But he has our highest grade on play action, and then he's top 5 against the blitz and top 5 in intermediate throws, 10 to 19 yards downfield. The Cowboys have the 4th most explosive receptions. Cooper Rush is cooking, man. He
is. He really, really is. The Rams have not been particularly solid. You look at, their passing offense, for example, and just their EPA per pass play. And it wasn't as if they were burning the place down last year, but they're below average passing offense right now, negative EPA per pass play. A lot of that has to do with Matt Stafford just kind of throwing the ball up for grabs here and there. But I'm not worried about, like, for example, the Dallas Cowboys being able to stop, Cooper Kupp in any way, shape, or form. Whereas on the other side, I do think that the Cowboys could make it, or the Rams could make it a little tricky on the Cowboys by putting, Jalen Ramsey on CeeDee Lamb, for example. So at 6, I think if I had to choose one side, I will take the Cowboys, but it's not one of my favorite bets out there.
Is that pass rush against a bad Rams offensive line? So maybe not Stafford, but second in pass rush win rate and second in pressure percentage. Obviously, getting guys from all over the place to contribute. Maybe that's how they win. Just kind of not letting Stafford have any time back there.
Yeah, it's a really good point, and he is not. He's just not looked like himself. I guess maybe he's the elbow or something like that. But yeah, it's a really good point. The Rams offensive line, they're missing Whitworth a little bit. Has not been nearly as solid, and the Cowboys have been dominant. I mean, they have the most sacks in the league, I believe. So it's a really good point. Sunday night, Bengals, Ravens in Baltimore. Brad, what'd you make this?
So I had Baltimore just under a field goal. I had Baltimore minus 2.5. Maybe an overreaction to today's result for Baltimore, but since he obviously getting the extra rest, playing some better football, and still just with Baltimore on, their fourth tackle, Daniel Falele, who actually held up decently against Buffalo. I thought he was going to give up like 10 sacks today. But yeah, so I think Cincy, low scoring game, enough of these kind of shootouts with Baltimore. I think it's going to be one of those classic divisional mid 40s total. I had Baltimore laying 2.5.
Yeah, I was pretty close to Brad on this one. I do have Baltimore basically -2. I have been higher on the Bengals, I would say, all this season especially, but even into last season as well. So we'll see. I might be overreacting to their Thursday night win a little bit too much, but I still don't think Baltimore has what it takes in the secondary to really slow down T. Higgins and Jamar Chase. I do think that, Marcus Peters, getting old, Marlon Humphrey, kind of a shell of his former self, have allowed a lot of big chunk type plays. And I think we're going to see at least one or two of those hit for Cincinnati on Sunday night. So I take the Bengals -2.
I have Baltimore favored by 3 in this game. I felt pretty strongly that it should not be either side of this. I think if you had to go either side of 3, you'd go 2.5 here. But no, these are the two best teams in the division, two best quarterbacks in the division. The Baltimore Ravens have home field advantage and a little bit of a coaching advantage, but they also have the weapons advantage. So I thought 3 was the right number. It's 3.5, and I like the Bengals here. I think they got off to a disappointing start, but if you're going to give me the hook with the Bengals, look, I get that Baltimore, just is coming off a loss and all that stuff, and they want to rebound, second home game, yada yada yada. But the Bengals are also well rested, and it's not as if they are just coasting and riding on their laurels, right? They have got to make up some ground given the way that they opened the season, especially with that loss to Pittsburgh. So I like this being a close game, and if a loss by a field goal gives me a cover, I will take it. So I will take Bengals getting 3 here. What about you guys?
Yeah, I'm definitely
Go ahead, Ben.
I'm definitely taking the Bengals too as well. I mean, a +3.5, I would bet that right now. I think like the most or second most difficult schedule coming up here according to PFF's power ratings page. So the Bengals don't really have the luxury of dropping any more games. I do think this is going to be a very winnable one for them at the end. And I think they take care of business here. So I take Bengals +3.5, probably on the money line as well, if that's an option here. But yeah, I think we're gonna see a pretty vintage Cincinnati performance.
I'll take it for the social. I really hate it. We're betting on the Ravens to lose 3 games in a row. But how can I avoid a social? We're all taking the same play, so why not?
Yeah, you have to get on board with that.
Yeah,
it just means
too many points.
It's going to end poorly. It's going to end poorly for us somehow, some way, shape, or form. Okay, Monday night, the Vegas Raiders go to Kansas City to play the Chiefs. Brad, would you make this?
I had Chiefs -7 in this one. And if it is that, I would probably bet the Chiefs right away. Yes, they just came off a big game against Tampa Bay, but I'm still not a huge Raiders believer. I don't think they're, one of the worst teams in the NFL, but, kind of eked one out today. Still could have lost that game against Denver, no question. And the Chiefs obviously just kind of own the Raiders in recent history.
Yeah, I would Kansas City -8.5, maybe baked in their performance tonight against Tampa Bay a little bit too much there. But, they looked like absolute world beaters. I do think this was the best version of Kansas City we've seen in quite some time. Obviously could have a little bit of a letdown, but I don't think it's going to come, against a divisional opponent at home with a little bit longer of a rest situation factored in. So I like Chiefs minus 8.5, and I'm not quite sure what the number would need to be in order for me to bet on the Las Vegas Raiders in this matchup.
It is Chiefs minus 6.5. I had it originally 5.5, and then watched Kansas City kind of put it together a little bit tonight, I thought, against Tampa Bay. So I bumped that up to 6.5, which is where it appears to be. My guess is if this is going to move in one direction, it's going to move towards Kansas City. So if you're looking to bet the Chiefs, like my take would be to go ahead and bet it now. And so I take it, Ben, that means that you are going to take the Chiefs 6.5.
Yeah, I got a lot of bets on my card here already. Which maybe I don't know. The D-Gen-ness came through, I guess, for us here early on. But yeah, I'm taking this one as well. I could be buying them at the top, but it definitely wouldn't be the first time I've done that with the Chiefs. So I guess I'm ready to ride it for one more week.
What about you, Brad?
Yeah, I'm taking this one as well. Ben, you got 8 plays on the board. This is my 4th, so my fifth. Okay, so I'm catching up. I think this is a no-brainer play. Maybe I'm overreacting a little bit, but they're just a better football team. Their defense, Kansas City's that is better now, and we saw some shootouts with the Raiders in years past, and that's kind of how those high variance games was how the Raiders stayed in some of these games. I think there's a less likelihood of that happening because KC can't hold up to a degree. I'm betting it before it gets to a touchdown for sure.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. I have a really hard time taking Derek Carr given what we've seen from him thus far, and I'm not overreacting to a win against the Denver Broncos. So I'm staying away from this one. Before we get out of here, we're going to talk about the bets that we like the most, and we'll write those up, and you'll see them on PFF.com when you wake up in the morning, or if you're listening to this already on a Monday, you can go check out what those are. Before I do that, though, fantasy football has already started, but Underdog Fantasy makes it possible for you to continue to get into the action all the way through the season with their pick'em game. Go to underdogfantasy.com or download the Underdog Fantasy app. Use promo code PFF, and Underdog will double your first deposit up to $100. It's really easy to play. All you have to do is guess higher or lower on a stat for a particular player, and you can win up to 20 times your money in a single night. Underdog keeps it super simple with their easy-to-use website and mobile app. I can attest it is easy to use. You pick between 2 and 5 players for your pick'em entry. Get all your picks right, and you'll take home some serious, hard, cold cash. So go to underdogfantasy.com or download the app, use promo code PFF, and get yourself rocked up to even if your fantasy team is out already, you can still enjoy yourself and make a little bit of cash. All right. We'll start with you, Ben. What are the few bets that I think right now or that you think right now make the most sense to bet?
Yeah, we just talked about this one, but I do think Cincinnati, obviously key number right around 3. They're at plus 3.5. Could easily see that slip down to plus 3. So I think getting the closing line value, everything else that associates with plus 3.5. I do see it at minus 120 at some of the books that I'm looking at. So it seems to be heading in that direction. So I do think it's probably the best play you can make in week 5 right now.
Any others? Or is that the only one that you really like?
I mean, I do like San Francisco, but I'm a little bit worried now if I'm going against your recommendation for them. Because I feel like maybe I don't see them as clearly as you do in that case. But I think San Francisco makes a lot of sense. And then, the Tennessee play I think is also just maybe too obvious for me, but I don't know. I think I just can't trust Carson Wentz at this point in time. So I know Ryan Tannehill maybe isn't like the greatest step up from Carson Wentz, but he is at least a step up from. So I'll take the road favorite basically in that matchup as well.
Brad, what about you?
Just real quick on Tannehill, early downs within 1 score, he's our highest graded quarterback and averaging 11 yards per attempt. So if that helps persuade you at all, Ben. For me, I think Green Bay. I know they obviously just went to overtime against Bailey Zappi, but I think it's kind of the same trap we fell for with them. And then they were -10 against the Bears, and they covered handily. Where they just maybe didn't show up for a game, but now they're going to London. I think it's a big deal. Rodgers wants to be the new king in London. I heard he's trying to vouch for the crown. So, So no, I just think they're getting healthier, and the Giants are getting less healthy. I think Jair Alexander maybe returns for the Packers in that game. I think he was close to playing this game and kind of stayed out for maybe this game. Daniel Jones, Tyrod Taylor both get hurt. Don't really know what's going on there. A little bit worried about Saquon Barkley running roughshod over them, but I think they cover 7.5.
I'm going to go with Cincinnati as well at 3. Like that one quite a bit. And then, I thought there are a couple of teasers that made some sense here. We talked about these different legs here, but Detroit out to 8.5 in New England. Tampa Bay down to 2.5 at home against Atlanta was another one. Tennessee, Washington out to 8.5. I think obviously with Carson Wentz sucking, that is a little terrifying, but remember Tennessee, despite what Brad just said, they still stink. So some teaser options there. I think another game just on its own that I would call out, Chicago, Minnesota 7-point favorite. That game today in London, it was fluky as fluky gets. So I think that's an interesting one. But we'll write these up. We will align on our favorites. You can check them out. We thank you all for hanging out, members of the printing press. On the first edition of the Forecast 2.0, we'll continue to tweak some things and get some feedback from you guys and see where we can improve and make this a really fun and engaging football conversation. We'll be back, keeping the same schedule on Wednesday night. We'll have a different set, different crew, maybe some familiar faces. You never know. You'll have to tune in to find out. Enjoy the rest of your Sunday night if you hung out with us live. If not, have a great Monday. Peace.